Hello and welcome to the Checkpoint podcast. My name is Joshua Boyles. I am a broadcast journalism student at the University of Salford, and I'm joined by my co-host today, Owen Connolly. How are you, dude?
Very good. My name's Owen Connolly. I'm a digital art student from Newcastle College. Good.
Yeah, we've dabbled in the sort of podcast realm a couple times over the last few years. We started 2 years ago on my creative media course. We did like a round table 3-man like video short podcast sort of thing for one of my assignments.
The now infamous.
If you go on my YouTube channel, you can find it. I think it's called Insert Name Here. I disappear halfway through because I didn't realise until the day that I actually had to vision mix half of it. So I was like, okay, I'm supposed to be presenting, but whatever. And then about a year, I think it's a year ago to the day, I think it was 26th of January, and we're recording this on the 25th of January. 26th of January last year, we premiered a video, it was a live streamed video podcast called, what was it called again? Player's Perspective Podcast.
That's the one. God, that was ages ago.
Yeah, well, it feels like that, but it was actually, I went back and watched the video feed of that, actually. We were way too ambitious with that. We tried to do it all live streamed, and we had it was way too ambitious. So now we're keeping things simple, going old school, well, not old school, but you know what I mean, with just an audio podcast, which we're going to try and get everywhere. Spotify, iTunes, we're taking over the internet. So Checkpoint is a brand that I've actually used before I started. I'm a journalist student at the University of Salford, and part of what I got involved last year with the student radio station, Shock Radio, where I had an hour slot on a Saturday, and I played tracks from video game soundtracks and talked about like the weekly games news, talked about what games I've been playing, and it was good. I enjoyed it. I got the experience that I wanted to from it, but it was a bit I didn't really enjoy doing it by myself. I felt like there wasn't really very much of a chemistry. I tried to get some sort of audience participation, and that didn't go too well. And yeah, it was good, but I didn't really feel like it was what I wanted it to be. So I think that a podcast is much more suited for this medium, and because obviously me and Owen have done this sort of thing before, or dabbled with it, we thought we might as well go in and try and do it again, but under the guise of an audio podcast.
It's interesting as well, because you'll find that in traditional radio, I feel like it's way more common to have many people on one broadcast now than it ever was back in the day. It used to be what you'd like, it was this person at 7, this person at 9, or whatever, but now it's like these groups of people at once, and I think it really lends to that sort of thing, you know.
Yeah, I think it really depends on what the program is, because if it's like a news, like I think radio used to be kind of much more this is the news, and much less. I'm not really been a radio person for much of my life, but I know what you mean. Like if you listen to BBC Radio Manchester now, there's like 3 or 4 people sat around a table,
and it's more pleasant, isn't it? Yeah,
it is. Yeah, it's much more interesting to listen to. So this podcast, there's a couple more obviously there's no like video game music in this, keeping that out, but we are going to be going through the weekly news digest, going through some of the news stories of the biggest news stories of the week, going through the important points and then discussing them a bit. Then we've got download discourse. This is like a work in progress title, but that's just me and Owen talking about what games we've been playing this week. We've got Hot Topic, which is discussing a predetermined question each week, getting a little bit philosophical maybe, we'll see. And then there's Release Rundown, which is a list of the games releasing in the last 7 days, so just like discussing them, maybe talking about some of the games that's coming out in the next 7 days, probably just a brief mention. And then the final segment is called Feels Good Man Clap, which is because the world's a piece of shit and nothing good ever happens, we're highlighting one wholesome thing to have come out of the entire week, just because we want to end on a high note, and there's not enough good in this world, so you know what I mean. Alright, let's get straight into the weekly news digest. So first story this week is EA have completely cancelled their open world Star Wars game. This is the original break comes from Jason Schreier, Jason Schreier, as most good video game reports do these days. He seems to be breaking everything. So the official comment from Electronic Arts was, there has been speculation overnight about one of our Star Wars projects. As a natural part of the creative process, the great work by our team at Vancouver continues and will evolve into future Star Wars content and games. We're fully committed to making more Star Wars games, and we're very excited about Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order from Respawn, and we'll share more about our new projects when the time is right. So this project that they've apparently cancelled now is called it was called Project Ragtag. That was originally developed by Visceral Games until they closed in October of 2018. That was supposedly a linear narrative game directed by Amy Hennig of Uncharted fame. The remnants of that development was then picked up by EA Vancouver and was rebranded into Project Orca to be then turned into an open world game. Respawn Entertainment are working on Jedi Fallen Order. That is scheduled for fall of this year. We'll see about that. And EA, final bit of information there, EA they acquired the Star Wars license from Disney in 2013. They're the only publisher that have the rights to make Star Wars themed games currently, and since 2013 they have released 2 Star Wars games, Star Wars Battlefront 1, or whatever you want to call it, in 2015, and Star Wars Battlefront 2 in 2017. Both were met with mediocre reception at best, I would call it, especially as Star Wars Battlefront 2.
Definitely at best, yeah.
Definitely, yeah. So I played both of them, and I fell off really hard from Star Wars Battlefront 1, and yeah, the same for Star Wars Battlefront 2. So yeah, this is really rough, especially coming. I think EA are they're in a difficult position because at this point, they've had this license for 7 years now. Yeah, 7 years. So we're coming up on 7 years. And they've only released 2 games in that time, which, given the amount of resources that EA have, the amount of development studios, that's not great. And obviously they weren't received very well, particularly well. So Disney have got to be breathing down their necks at this point, especially with the fallout that Star Wars Battlefront 2 had with the whole microtransaction loot box palaver. It's also incredibly rough, I think, because we've seen... I think EA are one of the developers recently that have been very anti-single player game. They're very much focused on the cash cows of the industry, the FIFA,
the live services,
yeah, exactly. If you look at one of EA's press, what do you call them, earnings calls, I'm working on a current piece about live services, and if you look at EA's earnings calls, they actually earn more from their live services than they do from any other part of their business, like physical sales, digital sales, anything like that.
It's difficult to say that is annoying, because that is earning them money, and you really can't criticize the fact that that's earning them money, but I feel like it hurts what people want to see.
Yeah, it's rough, especially because last year we had God of War, we had Red Dead Redemption was open.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, yeah. You think all of these like completely offline single player games that don't have live services or anything. And then Red Dead's a bad example. You know what I mean?
Especially with 2019 as well. I feel like it's going to continue that precedent. I mean, God of War and Spider-Man have, I feel like, paved such a great way that I think 2019 is going to continue with, like, Sekiro, Doom Eternal,
Metro Exodus,
Rage 2, these
Devil May Cry 5.
Yeah, just offline single player Bosch out
Days
games.
Gone.
Yeah.
Shenmue 3.
Yeah, it's mad.
Yeah, I'm going down. Well, if you want to know the sort of person I am, I spent 3 hours in January creating a very large spreadsheet of all the games releasing and whether I was going to buy them or not, and got my pre-orders in. So,
but yeah,
like full list.
I feel like coming back to it, it's just they're very much behind the curve. They're very much behind the curve for a company that I feel like wants to think they're ahead of the curve, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like looking at it from a business standpoint, you can see why people high up in that business would look at things like FIFA and look at things like Madden and all like the sports games, and even things like all their games that have live services. It's about like the mobile market as well. They must be making. Actually, that's the Star Wars game I should mention that they have released is. What's that mobile game? Galaxy of Heroes, something like that.
Something like that.
I
tried it. I tried it, and it was abhorrent.
Well, it's got quite a following apparently, and
of course it does.
Yeah, well, it's a mobile game.
Yeah.
It's got completely. We don't understand the mobile market because but whatever. It's like you can see why people high up in the business would look at those games and think, well, if those games can make that much money, why can't these other games? And if this project isn't feasible of making that much money, then why bother? We want to make something that's going to make money, which really narrows the scope of I think that they can go for.
And I think that completely breaks down to whoever is the higher ups at EA. I feel like EA right now is in a very very similar situation that Nintendo were in maybe 3-4 years ago. There's one story that I always particularly remember about Nintendo where one of the, I forget his name, one of the high-ups at Nintendo who had a lot invested in the company regularly had to go, obviously, to meetings for Nintendo games and their business. And he created a social media post one year that just said, I find it so embarrassing to go to these events because all they do is talk about childish things like video games and the future of video games and which video games are going to be released. And you think, you're a massive investor in that business and you will probably have a lot of say in that business, and you clearly know nothing about it.
I get that. I started reading Jason Schreier's book called Blood, Sweat and Pixels last night, and it basically it uses all of like the investigation work that he's done over the last 10 however many years he's been in the games journalism industry. And it's based like each chapter is a deep look into the story behind like the development of a certain game. So chapter 1 is Pillars of Eternity by Obsidian, and it talks about how like Obsidian were on almost the brink of going under until they discovered Kickstarter. And it talks about how the ways that games are made, and it's really quite fascinating because it makes you realize just how much relies on investors and publishers, because if you can't get the funding for the game you want to make, then that game's not happening. And if the investors say that you have to change it, otherwise they're not going to invest, then I mean, you don't really have much choice. At the end of the day, you need the money to make the game. So if that's why I feel bad for developers like DICE, especially DICE, and BioWare, because it's like incredibly talented developers. They must have a vision of what they want their game to be, but then publishers come in like EA and they've got you like, right, you have to meet this deadline, and it's like, well, we could do with an extra year to work on it and get this thing out the door, but no, it has to go out now, and we need live services and everything.
It's a problem. It's a problem that is scarily common now, but I think the main problem there is, as with many things in the world, big decisions are made by the people who have the biggest sticks or the biggest money, or sorry, the most money. And fortunately, in traditional business like retail, it's been around for so long that it's even those people at the very high up are quite confident they know how to sell something. Whereas social media, gaming, and the internet is relatively new, and there'll be many investors in these fields that will be invested in them because they're making a huge amount of money, but still won't understand why. And it'll lead to all sorts of mismanagement, all sorts of problems. We weren't going to touch on it, and we probably won't. But I think a good example is Machinima as well. Like, that's just gone, completely gone.
Yeah.
just eaten by a bigger fish.
It was Full Screen, and then they're owned by Otter Media, I believe.
I don't know.
Something like that.
But yeah, I think it's a problem that's going to get resolved as as time goes on, and people know what's going on. But there is a lot of mismanagement, and I feel like EA is definitely in the grips of that. You know, like,
Yeah.
just, I don't want to, obviously, stereotyping's bad, and saying, he said, she said, doesn't help.
Mhm.
But I think there is a problem with old-fashionedness, very conservative sides to the companies, kind of sticking to what they know, not wanting to do certain things. This was like Nintendo through and through, which is why the Switch has been so successful, because it's so different and because it focuses on so many different things and does something that Nintendo you'd never have expected them to do 5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's why it's so successful, and loads of Japanese companies have this problem, and I think EA has the problem as well, and they just don't know what they're doing.
Well, I mean, this kind of leads into our next news story, which is about the rental server program for Battlefield 5. We've actually got official comment from the global community manager, Dan Mitra. So if you don't know, the rental server program is DICE, EA, they used to run for, like, it's been a staple of the Battlefield franchise basically since it was conceived, is that you are able to, rent a server and have like control over certain server values, so like player health, how many snipers were allowed on that map, ticket rate, you could basically like create your own game modes.
Yeah,
and stuff.
is there a gun no one likes? You can, I think you can set that gun not to be in, right?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. You can ban certain weapons, and you get like insta kills with it. You instantly kill like people that use it with it. So we got the rental server programs have been in Battlefield games since they like first came out. The only one that I don't think it came to Battlefield 1 until after launch, and even then it was in like a very limited version of it. But like Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 3, I distinctly remember joining servers that was the great thing about it, is that it bred community. I remember distinctly like favoriting servers that I would go back to just because I know like that's a good server set and there's people on there that I enjoy playing with.
And the people who are picking specific servers, and you're getting higher quality games.
Yeah, exactly, and it helped to alleviate some of the like the balancing issues that were like prone with multiplayer games. Like it's obviously difficult to balance a multiplayer game, and if something isn't quite right, it's fine if you've got rental server programs, because you can just ban that weapon or whatever, or tweak the damage model. It's fine. So this isn't actually in Battlefield 5 yet, and we got a quote from Dan Mitra, who is the global community manager. So he says, in regards specifically to rental server programs, I'm going to keep it simple. You haven't seen an update in our direction with RSP because we haven't made a full decision internally whether or not we can deliver it. RSP needs to meet standards and our expectations with the tools we provide. That takes development resources. It also needs to make economical development sense. We can't introduce a feature that ends up costing more to keep maintained than it returns. I know that statement will open up more debate, and I encourage that, but it is the reality of the situation. In other words, we don't want to impact development resources of main game quality of life commitment and upcoming content by routing team bandwidth to RSP development. There's also financial implications here that go well beyond my remit. Let's tackle the former before we tackle the latter. That said, is RSP off the table? Not at all. Our teams need to weigh this carefully and either commit fully to the service or not provide it at all. You need an official statement on what that decision is once it's been made. That doesn't quite make sense, I don't think. But anyway, you get the point. So he's basically saying that there's a lot of factors that are going into deciding whether RSP is even going to be in Battlefield 5 at all. He mentioned stuff about like the economic value of it being put in, which, I mean, it's great that we've got this response at all, to be honest, because
it's surprisingly
5,
honest.
It is, yeah. However, some parts of it do seem like a little bit, as he mentions, it raises more questions. I mean, like if it is, I for one don't understand why it's such a mystery to, I'm going to say DICE, but it's probably more EA, as to why RSP would be economically challenging if it has been in every single Battlefield games before this. I mean, you obviously have they obviously have the data that can confirm whether or not this is economically viable. In terms of development resources, that's a different thing. Obviously, Battlefield 5 feels definite. I'll talk about this a little bit later when we talk about what we've been playing, but it feels very much to me like an early access game. It feels very much like it shouldn't have been, that it could have done with a few more months in the oven, to put it lightly, and that I personally don't agree with the way that the live service is being handled. It certainly feels to me that the live service is an excuse to put the game out early and a way of spreading out content over a longer period of time. Which obviously is going to have an impact on the resources that they have at DICE. If people are, working on content over a longer period of time, maybe there's no one there to manage RSP. It's disappointing that it's not here, but just because I think because we've had it in Battlefield games before so much, and we know the benefits that it has, and we know how important it is, that it's just it's another one of those disappointments that's come with Battlefield 5, because again, like yes, this game makes step forwards with its development, but it seems like for every step forward, we've got 2 steps backwards. And yeah, it's just frustrating for me especially as an avid Battlefield 4 player.
Yeah, I think the thing that raises the most questions for me here, much to EA's chagrin, I imagine, would be, this is something that, if he said this during Battlefield 4 or Battlefield 1, as much as anyone could say, this is nonsense, this isn't right, you would never be able to prove it. You'd never be able to prove the financial impact of that hurting the company, because the key bit in Battlefield 4 and 1 is the fact that their DLC model was, well, you paid for each expansion.
Yeah, exactly.
You paid for China Rising. You paid for, what was it? Back to.
Oh Christ! I can't remember.
Oh well, whatever it was, you paid for each one. So let's say hypothetically in Battlefield 4, they didn't have a RSP system, and people were asking for it, and he said, "Well, we've got too much development time dedicated to these DLCs, so we can't put it towards this." I'd be like, well, okay, that's a bit annoying, but fair enough. In Battlefield 5, all DLCs and all expansions, because of the live service model, are free.
Yeah.
And the income of Battlefield 5, does it have microtransactions or not?
Okay, right, we're getting into a whole other topic here with these microtransactions.
Should I brace myself?
I don't even understand it fully myself. So you've got company coin, which
I'm already confused.
So you've got company coin, which is like the currency that you earn by playing. There was a bug recently that because you earned it as you were ranking up, but then when you hit rank 50, you stopped earning it. So it was like a finite resource, and that's only just been patched recently.
That's
so that you
madness.
Can now earn it again.
That's the worst oversight. I didn't know about that. I don't play Battlefield 5 personally. I didn't know that happened. That's very funny.
Yep, and that you can use that to buy cosmetic items, and I think you earn them from doing assignments and stuff. But yeah, you use that to like buy cosmetic items and stuff. And now they're bringing in something called battle coins. I think they're called battle coins. I think they've been shortened to boins or something
Boins.
like that.
I mean, it says a lot. It says a lot about the overuse of the word battle in modern video gaming. The term boins is less bad than battle coins.
My idea was B-Bucks, but
right. That is both horrific and excellent, and and B-Bucks is better than battle coins is.
Yeah, they should have gone for that one. I think that they're coming out soon, if not already, and I think you can also buy cosmetic items with that. And yeah, that's like that. I think, as far as I know, that's the only microtransaction that there is.
Right, but the thing there is that obviously I don't know. I'm not a game developer, but I think that the introduction of a paid currency for cosmetics, it is a very different kettle of fish to creating a rental server program. and it's just
Yeah.
it's like I think the TLDR of this is that I don't understand. I can understand them saying we're working on Tides of War, therefore we don't want to do this. The fact that he says we can't do it because it doesn't make financial sense doesn't make any sense. Because
I think,
if you're developing
yeah.
this game specifically so that your long-time players will maybe buy microtransactions, or that you can get new players in with a lot of content and new stuff, then surely making the game, introducing a feature like this is only
And
going to help you.
yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is why I don't understand that they don't realize how big of an impact RSP is. Because for me personally, I first got into the franchise with Battlefield 3, and then Battlefield 4 was the main one where I really sunk my time into it. I think I've got like 550 hours in it or something like that. And for me, it was the RSP features of having, I had a list of servers in my favorites list that I kept going back to because it was a sense of community, and I knew that I liked those rule sets. So yeah, I just don't understand it. I think another one of the issues here is that people don't understand enough about how games are made. Like, it is still a mystery, and games are magic to a lot of people, including me. I wish I knew more about how games were made and about what goes on behind the scenes, which is why I'm reading Jason Schreier's book
You
now.
can learn about individual elements. You can learn about, how do animators rig models, how do environment artists build environments, how do coders, in layman's terms, code specific things. But there's nothing that's more terrifying and mad to me than releasing a game as a company, specifically a smaller company, like Ninja Theory, let's say, for example, because I put them on the brain, who aren't as big as someone like EA or Bethesda, who have multiple projects on the go at once. They have a project, they finish it, they move on to their next project. And I think being 1 or 2 years into a project, that's what you come in the office for, and you know where you're going with it. But then, what happens the day after you've launched the game and you come in and you go, right, blank piece of paper, how to make a game? It's insane. I don't even know how it's done.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we're going to start. We're going to talk a bit later about 2019 trends and stuff. But I think that what we need to see more of is developers and even publishers actually providing some sort of material that in layman's terms, like, helps people understand what actually goes into making video games. And I think part of that a lot is the job of the journalists as well, because we've seen Chris Bratt from Eurogamer. He's left Eurogamer and he's gone to start his own YouTube channel, which is called People Make Games, and that channel is about the people behind games and how games are developed. No Clip, Danny O'Dwyer, doing a fantastic job making games documentaries about how games are made, the people behind them. IGN have just recently started up a new series which is basically the same thing. Jason Schreier, I think there's a lot of material out there already, but I think that we're going to start seeing a lot more material come to light, especially with the whole working conditions thing from Red Dead last year. That's a whole other talking point. But yeah, I think that part of this issue of not understanding what actually goes on behind the doors of a video game development company is a big issue that feeds into this whole thing of why people are annoyed that a certain feature isn't in my video game, but it was last time. You know what I mean?
There are so many. It's pretty much unavoidable from a gamer's standpoint to look at a decision that a developer makes and not say, who thought this was okay?
Yeah.
Like, how did this happen? And it's very easy to start pointing fingers and say, this person's an idiot, this is mismanagement, this is stupid, but there might actually be way more behind it that you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see if more comes from that story. We'll be certain to report it on here. All right, the next few stories aren't too long, I don't think. This next one's about Dark Souls, and Demon Souls as well. Hidetaka, how do you say that? Hidetaka Miyazaki.
I'll get me weeb on. Hidetaka Miyazaki.
The creator of the the grandfather of Demon Souls and Dark Souls, the legendary game designer, he's commented on the possibility of a Demon Souls remaster. So speaking to Game Informer in an interview, he said, it's like when you write when you're younger, you look back on previous work and you think, oh goodness, what was I thinking? I definitely know that feel, looking back at the podcast that we did 2 years ago.
I think everyone knows that feel.
Yeah. It's not that I'm embarrassed, I just don't like to look at my previous works. You'd have to see what, and talking about a possible Demon's Souls remaster, he says, you'd have to see what Sony are thinking about it. If it was a studio that really loved the original work and really put their heart and soul into realising it again, then that's something I would enjoy. But it's really complicated because I have these fond memories. Thinking about the idea of a remaster gives me a kind of butterflies in my stomach and makes me a little nervous, so it's complicated. But I understand that there are many users and many players and fans out there who really love Demons, so that's something that So if that's something they could accomplish with a studio that loved the work, then yeah, I'd be okay with that. I know you're a huge Dark Souls fan. Did you play Demon Souls?
I never played Demon Souls. Demon Souls is a game that I actually thought it was the prequel to Dark Souls for a long time, but they're completely unrelated. It's essentially
it's just the mechanics that transfer over, isn't it?
Yeah, quite similar mechanics. And it's actually, while I personally think that it's not, if you've never played the Souls franchise, I think it's okay to miss Demon Souls. But I think if you have played the Souls games and liked them, while you don't necessarily have to play Demon Souls, it's really interesting to go back and look at some of the level design and look at some of the enemies you'll see, because you'll recognise a lot of them. They're quite similar things that you'll see transferred into some. It's similar to when you see, you'll see a film a director's made, and you go back and watch an old film that they did, and while it's completely different, you'll spot something and you'll think that's exactly the same.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to see. But while I've never played Demon Souls, what he said that's interesting there is, if it was a studio that really loved it and could put their heart and soul into realising it again, kind of in a modern day sense, he'd like that. And that would get me on board. If From Software themselves said, we're going to do a Demon Souls remaster, I wouldn't have that much faith in that. Because while I think that the most recent Dark Souls 1 remaster was good in that it ported the game to Switch, it made it run at a good frame rate, helped bolster the online player base again, I don't think that remaster was very good in a lot of ways. I don't think it made enough graphical improvements. I think there was a lot of gameplay stuff that they could have fixed that they didn't. They could have ran on the same engine as 3 did, at least. And I think that if From Software themselves remade it, it would be a very similar story to the Dark Souls 1 remaster. However, if it was remade by another studio, I'd be very much okay with that, because the two of the best remasters in current times are the Crash Bandicoot remaster and the Spire remaster, who were made by studios completely different to their original developers. And they were extremely, extremely good, to the point where...
I'm going to add to that, because I'm interrupt. I'm just going to... I'm glad that you brought up the other games that, remastered by completely different studios, because while you've been talking there, I just Googled which studio developed the remaster for Shadow of the Colossus, because that was also a quality one. That was Blue Point Games who made that one. Is
Resident Evil 2 the same developer?
I believe it is, yeah.
Okay, so that doesn't count. But I think it opens up actually a bigger discussion about how limited gaming was back in the day, but how big the visions were of game directors, and they just couldn't. Obviously, there was incredible games from back in the day, such as Resident Evil 2.
But I know exactly what you mean, because I've been playing... Yeah. We'll talk about Resi 2 later, but I've been playing it today, and it has blown my mind slightly, because I've been sat playing it thinking, this feels incredibly... Well, it feels incredibly modern, not just because of the way that the game plays, but it feels like the gameplay loop and like the things that I'm doing. Like, yeah, I'm going around solving these puzzles, but it's like, if you didn't tell me this was a remaster of a game from 21 years ago, I wouldn't have known the difference. Maybe in the cutscenes, because I'll talk about it later, but the cutscenes are very, very 90s. But yeah, I know what you mean, and it is that thing where, you see, I personally quite liked the Dark Souls remaster, but that was because I never played the original. I wasn't a complete newbie to the franchise because I started with 3. And I thought it was quite nice to go back to Dark Souls 1 and see it not looking incredible. It looks good, but it's
well, it does.
Not...
It would do the same thing, that you'd played things in 3 and then you'd see them in 1. I think there are so many opportunities for games from the past to. I think there was a time when I really wasn't behind the idea of remakes, and I think it's because the remakes that were being made were remakes that just didn't need to be made.
Yeah, like The Last of Us Remastered, which came to PS4 like 3 years after.
Yeah, it's like 2013. Like, that's not a remaster, that's a port.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a port. But I imagine so many games that I played when I was younger.
It was a year.
It wasn't, was it?
Last of Us Remastered came out 29th of July 2014.
God's sake.
The Last of Us came out 14th of June 2013.
It's not a remaster, that's a port. Okay, whatever.
That's a port,
whatever.
Yeah.
But I think there's so many games that I played when I was younger that had such good hooks and such good elements to them that are reasons I still love them. But because of how dated they were, they just wouldn't fly now at all. But they could be easily remade into amazing games. Like, I think if you remade Sonic Heroes, made it play exactly the same, made the graphics up to snuff with modern standards, and made it not control like pure ass, it would be an absolutely brilliant game. People would love that.
Forces or whatever the fuck it was called.
We don't talk about that.
I mean, if any of the Demon Souls or Dark Souls games were to be remastered, I think Demon Souls would be the one, because I think, yeah, it had some great ideas, and it'd be nice to go back and see where the series originated from. But if you want to bring out a PS2 and go and play that at 12 FPS with like a DualShock 2 controller or whatever it was, I mean, good luck on your head. I don't think that's the best experience. So
you could even pull a Resident Evil 2 with it and keep the core of the game very much the same, but change a lot. You can have a lot of creative freedom with it, and I think Miyazaki would be okay with that, because as he says, when you look back on your previous work, you think, what was I thinking? So I think,
yeah, exactly.
If he could give the framework,
a second take of it.
If he could get like a young studio that he really likes and say, this is my, like, I have much dishonor from this, but you can make it great. I think he'd love that, and I'd be behind that 100%.
I'd see it. Yeah, I'd play it. That would go straight on my essential list in my spreadsheet. Okay, following up slightly on that, there's actually a Dark Souls remastered. What is it called? It's a Dark Souls Trilogy Collector's Edition coming to Europe on May 31st, which costs a small loan of £450. It's when you can buy the game just like the trilogy without the Collector's Edition, which gives you Dark Souls Remastered, Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin, and Dark Souls 3, The Five Fates. That's all the DLC and all the soundtracks. Or if you want to fork out £450, you can also get the Elite Knight standing at a bonfire 34cm statue.
What even is Elite Knight? I've never even heard that term. You can Google that.
It's like you'll find it. You'll know it when you see it. It's like the main like knight armor that you can find. At least from Dark Souls 3.
Okay, I didn't know that's what that armor was called. I think it's because I just never played knight.
You also get a 460 Dark Souls Trilogy Compendium, which has complete guides to all the areas and items, and it also has a full transcript of all the dialogue in all of the games.
Do you know what would be great? Reading that.
They sold that separately, so I could buy that.
Well, first off, I think they will.
I hope so, because I'll buy that in a heartbeat.
Do you know what would be really funny? If all of the dialogue was exactly as it was written, but all of the dialogue from the Firekeepers is just the first line of each thing they say. Do you know what I mean?
I know roughly what you mean.
So, basically, in every Dark Souls game, you go... excluding Dark Souls 1, because in Dark Souls 1 you just level up at a bonfire. But in Dark Souls 2, 3, and Bloodborne, you go to a specific NPC, And the first time you go to them, or the first 2 or 3 times, you'll listen to what they have to say. But then you go back to them 50 to 100 times for the rest of the game, and you just skip through their dialogue. So in Dark Souls 2, everyone will know that you hear, what is it? Undead, seek, less this, and that's it. And then and then in Dark Souls 3, I think it's like Ashen, seek, and then I think it's the same. It's something like that. I just think it would just be so funny if that's the only dialogue they have.
Well, that's the only bits that anyone's ever actually heard properly. Yeah, and I really hope they sell a separate version of that, because I'll be like the Dark Souls lore. I don't understand it, but I appreciate it. There's only going to be 2,000 of them made. I don't think many people. Well, people will buy them. Don't get me wrong.
The Dark Souls fans will buy them.
They'll buy them.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were gone like that.
They're probably already gone. I mean, what is even the point of reporting this? But you can pre-order it on the Bandai Namco website if you're quick enough. And the last story on this week's list is Parliament wants your opinion on links between games and gambling. This story comes from Eurogamer. So the Commons Select Committee, which is a sector of UK Parliament, has opened an inquiry into addictive technologies to the public. This inquiry... Why do I live in Salford? Where?
Is that it? Have they finally found him?
Oh, I don't know what's going on, but that's like the 4th set of sirens that have gone outside my window tonight. Where was I? Yeah, this inquiry seeks to look at how the addictive nature of some technologies can affect users' engagement with gaming and social media, particularly amongst younger people, intended to help the government keep pace with the increasing digitisation and gamification of people's lives. If you want to write in, you can write and submit your own submission to the inquiry, as long as it's shorter than 3,000 words.
Because if it's over 3,000 words and really in-depth and complicated, they'll just go, no, I'm not interested.
I can't be asked to read that. Even like when I submitted my first piece of coursework for IT, and it was, I think the assignment was like, describe what each of these PC components do, and because they said it over the summer holidays, I wrote 8,000 words. And the feedback I got from Mr. Nesbitt was, this is great work, Josh, but if you ever submit any piece of work that is 8,000 words long again, I will kick you off this course.
I didn't know you did that.
I did that, yeah. That was my first piece of sixth form work.
I just love that what they're saying there is, you could create the most in-depth, basically study or essay, and give it to UK Parliament to read upon, and you could have a PhD. They wouldn't read it, and then Karen from Basingstoke could go, they're not, they're fine, and apparently that's better.
Yeah, that is quite funny. So the subjects tackled are the immersive media industry, the future of esports in the UK, the wider use of gamification and VR or AR, that's virtual reality or augmented reality, tackling digital and gaming addiction, the links between gaming and gambling, data security and infrastructure. So I think the biggest ones there particularly are tackling digital and gaming addiction. That was after the World Health Organization last year actually defined gaming disorder as a thing, and also the links between gaming and gambling, which links into the whole loot box scandal that we've seen elaborate over the last sort of 2 years or so. But that's actually, I think, is it the Netherlands? Overwatch I know Overwatch specifically has been asked to remove their loot boxes from their game in a certain country, and I'm pretty sure it's either Norway or it begins with an N and it's in Europe, so it's one of them.
There's definitely a European country that's had them removed.
Yes, I think Hawaii,
China as well.
China, yeah.
They did find a loophole. In China, you can't. This is a mad loophole, by the way. You can't buy loot boxes in Overwatch anymore, but you can buy the in-game credits.
Right. Okay.
So I
you
think
buy them with that then.
Yeah, but I think that because you buy the credits, then you can spend them on exactly what you want. It's not gambling anymore, which makes sense.
That does make sense. I know in Hawaii, I don't know how US politics work, but like a person high up in Hawaii is going hard on is going hard on loot boxes.
I can't wait until you play Persona 5 because it's the exact same. I feel like even the people in Japan just don't know how their own government works because it's so complicated. So anytime they have to talk about like someone in government, they just go, "Oh yeah, he's really high up."
It is quite worrying considering that one of my next modules for this next semester is government reporting, which I guess it's there to learn in it.
Just go stand in front of Parliament for a while. You'll be fine.
Yeah, just watch the news, talk about Brexit for a bit. So yeah, there's not really much to talk about there. It's nice to see that even with all of this, Brexit bollocks that's going on. That's my new favourite term, by the way. Brexit bollocks. It's mine. BB, bit of BB on the BBC Breakfast News talking about Brexit bollocks.
BB on the BBC.
BBC Breakfast talking about Brexit bollocks. Yeah, it's nice to see that is actually our own government is actually getting involved, and it's not just being left to other foreign countries that actually care.
I don't think it's like I don't really think it's worth discussing because the loot box thing is so oversaturated as a news topic. It's mad. It is. There's
not much. But there's nothing new to add to it.
Yeah.
This isn't even really.
I think it's just good that is a thing now.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge it, really.
Yeah, and let's just hope that the government actually hire people who are knowledgeable and don't just get Theresa May's mum to say, "Oh, that's rubbish."
Or Graham Linehan.
Or Graham.
That's enough for the news this week. Let's get on to talking about what games we've been playing. So, Owen, do you want to start? What have you been playing?
Well, I'm going to mention a game that I told myself that I wouldn't mention until randomly I think it was yesterday, it hit version 1.0. I told myself, Josh, that I wouldn't mention it, but because it's hit version 1.0, I'm allowing myself to.
If this is Slay the Spire, I'm kicking you from the call.
Right, let's move on then.
Right, go on.
Yeah, so Slay the Spire is what I thought was still a hit indie game, but has apparently absolutely smashed every indie record that I think I can think of. It's beloved by many people who enjoy card games now. It's the game that I play when I'm doing anything that isn't anything else. It's come from early access to be a really expansive, brilliant card roguelike, like deck building game. It's quite difficult to explain, and it's a game that you can sort of see screenshots of it and you can think, I think that looks too complicated, or it might not be my thing. It's 99% sure to be your thing. You will really like Slay the Spire. I don't want to talk about it too much, but to sort of give a TLDR on it, as someone who's played a lot of games, the developers, the game design itself, everything that's in that game is basically perfect. And the only reason you wouldn't give it a good score is if it wasn't your thing, and that's fine. But I think it is I think it's what's the... I don't know the term for it.
Pinnacle?
It's the pinnacle of its genre games right now. And if you are even slightly interested in it, buy it, because I have 220 hours on it.
Jesus. Well, last time I checked, you had like 100, and that was about a month ago.
Well, that's what I mean. It's the game that you play when you're not doing something else. Like,
it is a bit of a meme in Discord at the minute.
It's
where's Owen going? What's Owen doing right now? And we just look at Discord and it's like, guess. Slay the Spire. That's what he plays.
But yeah,
no, I've not touched Slay the Spire because card games really aren't my thing. I mean, I used to play Hearthstone when I was in sixth form just because it was available on mobile and I didn't have a Switch back then. So it was like, well, if I'm going to play a game at lunchtime, it's like I've got 20 minutes, I'll play a few games of Hearthstone. I wouldn't say I was huge on it. I enjoyed the bits that I played, but is Slay the Spire like? See, this is the thing. It's like building decks. And like I never played. I didn't play many like like Magic or like Pokemon cards or anything. I never played like card games like that physically when I was young. So I think that's probably why I don't have the draw to them now.
And that's something that I expected going into it, and I thought there was going to be a huge learning curve because someone said it's a deck building game. But the deck building in a traditional card game comes down to having loads of cards, like hundreds even, and saying, right, pick 30 or whatever the game is. Like in Hearthstone's case, it would be, right. So of all these cards, pick 30. Make them work in synergy together. Make them have a nice mana curve. Make sure you have everything. And I looked at it and I thought, I'm not confident in myself to do that. I'm going to leave it. And I just wasn't interested. And I thought Slay the Spire would be the same thing. But the thing that's so good about it is you start each run, and you get into little combats and little events. And after each event, it gives you 3 cards to choose from, and it says, pick one of these to add to your deck. And that's it. That's the only decisions that you have to make throughout the game. So you think, okay, what kind of deck am I going to make this run? Or I've just got a special item, or I've got a card at the start, so I'm going to build around that. It's really, really intuitive after a while, and it just isn't complicated. There's a lot to learn, but it's the sort of learning that isn't like... There's nothing like... It doesn't have the problem that a lot of roguelikes do, where you're screwed unless you know what's coming up.
Yeah.
Everything that happens, you can deal with. There's no, like, randomness. You don't get... Well, it is a very random game by its nature, because it's a card game.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any...
You always feel like if someone plays a card, then you've got something that can counter it. Is that the thing?
Well, the opponents... Honestly, people call it a card game. I don't even think it is. I think it's a turn-based RPG. That's honestly what I think it is. You play cards to hit the enemy, but that's all it really comes down to. Anyway.
Okay.
Fantastic game. It can only go up. The devs will just be diving in their pools of money at this point, I'm sure. But yeah.
So you said it hit 1.0 this week.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And how much is it? It's about...
It's
15 quid?
£11.
Oh, that's all right then. So yeah, if I was going to get into a card game, I'd probably be Gwent, but that's just because I'm a Witcher nut. So I don't know. I might.
It's easy. It's easier than Gwent.
Okay, that's all right. That because I struggle with it. Like as much as I love The Witcher, I can't comprehend Gwent very well. Yeah. Have you got anything else on your list? Because mine's huge. I'm not saying rush through yours, but I'm just saying mine's huge.
I think I've been trying to clear a lot of backlog stuff.
I feel you.
I knew that DMC 5 was coming out this year, and although it isn't in any way related, I've been playing what is considered by many to be the bastard child of that franchise, which is DMC Devil May Cry, developed by Ninja Theory, now of Hellblade fame. This is a game that pretty much... I wouldn't say every Devil May Cry fan, but most of the people who played the original series loathe this game entirely. It's a game that they have a similar experience of. It's kind of like my relationship between the modern Tomb Raider games and the old ones.
Yeah. Where
I know the new Tomb Raider games are good, decent, but I really, really dislike them.
Yeah, just because they're such a departure from the tones of the original.
And DMC Devil May Cry is very much the same. It's the story, while having a really interesting world and some decent acting at points, is really not worth watching. It's quite cheesy at times. It's got a soundtrack that I personally like, but it's a bit more Black Veil Brides than BFG Division.
Right. Gotcha. This is on my list of things to play as well, because I haven't touched the Devil May Cry franchise at all. But seeing the stuff of I got gifted this one DMC because one of my mates on Twitter, like internet friend, got it in their Humble Bundle monthly, and they were just like on Twitter like, "Yo, does anyone want any of these codes?" And I was like, "Yo, if DMC's free, I'll take that if you don't mind." So I got it for free off a mate. So, but it is on my list, especially with DMC Devil May Cry 5 coming up. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing it, but the amount of things on my on my backlog at the minute is pushing it far down. So I'm not quite sure when. I'm looking forward to it though.
Yeah, it's like I say, the soundtrack. I think you will like it.
I think the Devil May Cry soundtrack. So because I am a big fan of what's the one from Devil May Cry 5?
Well,
Devil Trigger.
yeah, well, who doesn't like Devil Trigger at this point?
Well, quite a lot of people.
Really?
You know, when they did that. Yeah, you know when they did that live performance at the.
Well, I'll be fair. The live performance I felt was weak.
I know, but like, you know what I mean. Like, there was people. Like, I saw a lot of criticism on Twitter, just like, "What is this trash tune?" Just like even the original, and I was like, "Whoa, this is like my best gym tune."
Well, it's like I think very similar to a lot of horror franchises. DMC has a particular tone that if you don't know it has that tone before you play it, you're thinking, is this intentional or is this just bad? And
yeah,
it's intentional.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I think the soundtrack I really enjoy. The story isn't good, but the gameplay is absolutely fantastic, and it's worth playing. If you want a really just fun hack and slash to play, it's not and I think that the thing I like about it most is it gives one of the main criticisms with a lot of hack and slash games. One of my favorite hack and slash games, Metal Gear Rising, even had this problem, which is once you find that combo that is just really good, it's the only one you use.
Yeah.
And it can make...
I had that with Nier Automata when I played that for a bit last year.
Yeah, and it can make gameplay feel really stale after a while. And you think, well, I could try other combos, but whenever I try other combos, they're just not very good, so why don't I just keep doing this one? And then I win. DMC Devil May Cry is specifically built around the fact that you have to use certain weapons on certain things. You have to play in a certain way. You're given style points for not using the same move twice.
Okay.
Which is really nice.
Like variety point. You get that in the Batman, in the Arkham games
Yeah.
as well. You get a variety score for
Yeah.
using different combos.
It's like in a lot of like skateboarding games and SSX games did that further down the line as well, where you'd find one particular trick that was just so good and you'd only use that, and they were like, well, we're putting all this effort into making all these tricks and no one's using them, so if you use the same trick twice, it will come up as repeat trick, like minus 90% of the points you would have earned.
Yeah, so you gotta switch things up.
Yeah, so it makes a really fresh combat, and it's honestly a great game, and it gets far too much hate. I think the best way to sum it up is it's the bastard child of the series, but that's what Dante is. People love him.
Yeah, fair enough. Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna get to that one at some point this year. It is on my list, my ever increasing list. Cool. Anything else?
I made the mistake of playing League again because their cinematics are very good.
The animation department is too good.
The animation department is too good at making you think that, oh, that's what the game's like, and then you play it and you're like, that's not what the game's like.
Yeah. Is that new map in it yet?
Yes.
Is it?
No, not yet.
This sounds like a complicated.
It's been in 2 betas, that's why.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. At least they're testing it.
But yeah.
They're testing the waters for this, 10-year-old game?
Well, you have to give it credit that it's got as many players as it does, and
That's true.
It's 10 years old. I'll tell you though,
League.
speaking of games, I think that'll probably be the last game that I've been playing, but again, another game that I've been playing, and we've both been playing, that we really like, I think, is Ring of Elysium.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, we've played a couple matches. This is about a week ago now. Ring of Elysium it's PUBG, but it works, and it's like it's kind of like SSX, you know, like trying to think of the best comparison, like SSX, Tony Hawk's, like
Extreme Sports.
That's the one.
Extreme Sports plus PUBG.
It's a weird mix, but it works strangely.
It's a game that I find really mystifying because is it a Korean game? It is, isn't it?
It's Tencent, which I
know
think is...
I know it's published by Tencent, but I don't think Tencent made it.
I think it's South Korean.
Well, the first thing I said when the game opened up, and I looked at the character creator, was, "What, the Korea?"
Yeah.
It looks very Korean when you open it.
Tencent games are Chinese.
Right, so it's a Chinese game. It's a game that I really don't understand, because it's a Chinese battle royale game that seems to have a very gimmicky draw of this sort of extreme sports element, and it's just so weird. And you start it up and you think, I'm going to play one match of this and hate it, and it all works.
Yeah, it's like it runs well on your PC, and the shooting mechanics feel good. The netcode isn't complete wang. Movement feels good. Like, it genuinely surprised me, because I think in the first match that it's like, because I play a lot of Fortnite and Black Ops and Battlefield, so for me, like, running up to a window and vaulting through it is like natural to me, and I just went and did it, and I was like, oh, like, I don't know why I'm surprised that this works, but because it looks so much like PUBG, I'm surprised it works, if you know what I mean.
And even the fact that you want to vault through a window, and it's like, right, and the devs think, right, the player just wants to vault through a window. We don't need to... We need a very simple, fast animation for that. We don't need a Battlefield 5 animation for it. And we don't need the PUBG animation for it, where it feels like your head gets contorted into your body while you climb through a window.
Battlefield 5 animations are like watching Dunkirk every time you want to, like, lie down or something like that.
It would be great if like the whole Shrek and B-movie memes, where it's like whenever X happens, the film speeds up. It would be like anytime a player vaults through a window in Battlefield 5, the entirety of Dunkirk plays.
That's my next YouTube project. Yeah, so we've only played a couple of matches, but it's I think we did a couple on the snow map, and then we did one or two on, like, the new, like, tropical island map, which is pretty cool. That's got, like, BMX bikes where you, like, stunt it across the...
And then it has bits of the map that are just really, like, just... It feels like I'm insulting a nation here. Like, just going into this and expecting it to be so bad.
Yeah.
But you just go...
It is weird, yeah.
You go in, it's just, you just go in, and there's bits of the map, and you think, wait, that looks really cool. I've never seen that in another game. And then...
I think that's part of the thing to do with, you know, the difference in the culture between the East and the West, especially the video game culture, because we're so used to Western developed video games, and we very rarely get to see. That's why I think I'm so mystified by Dark Souls since I've started playing it in the last couple of years, because the Japanese sort of design mantra is like, but like, it's like their take on a Western RPG, and this is like, it's Chinese. It's like an Eastern take on the Western formula of battle royale, which is quite refreshing, I think.
Yeah, and it feels like Japan is starting to get out of that. It's starting to get out of the sort of conservative element of game design that I talked about earlier, with like stuff like Nintendo. The things that were seen as staples, the absolute diehards of franchises didn't want removed, they're removing because they know people don't want them, and it's so nice to see. Like, I was told Persona 3 and 4, which I haven't played, have got ridiculous amounts of grinding, but the fans of the game really love that. And I played Persona 5 on hard, and it has none. It's still a very hard game on hard, but there's no grinding, there's no tedium. There's just a lot of really nice player design choices to go, we respect your time, even though the game's like 100 hours long, but never mind. It's like...
Talk about that. I'll talk about that again when I talk about Assassin's Creed Odyssey.
It's like, we respect your time, so we're not going to make you do a lot of really annoying stuff you don't want to do.
That's going to be a big topic when I talk about the games that I've played this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at a couple on my list thinking, that applies very in the same way, but not positive.
But yeah, I would recommend Ring of Elysium if you like battle royale games and you feel kind of bored of them and you've been wanting to go back to PUBG, or maybe you have gone back to PUBG and then you play a match and realise that it's shit and then stop playing.
I did that.
Yeah.
I went back and played a match of PUBG after playing
It always
Ring
happens,
of
doesn't it?
Elysium.
It always happens.
I'd rather just play Ring of Elysium because
you'll play Fortnite for a bit. You'll get sick of someone building the Burj Khalifa when you shoot them. You think, I want to go play PUBG again because I miss the raw, tactical, cool gameplay of PUBG. And you get in and you're just humping a tree for 20 minutes. It's like, it's just not...
Tree,
and
then some knobhead with a pan comes over, or some knobhead who's lying in a bush 4 miles away snipes you in the head.
Yeah, it's and you realise you don't want to play it. And I thought this game was going to be the exact same thing. And I thought, people were like, oh yeah, it's got a really big following. It's actually not that bad. We're like, that's exactly what someone said about PUBG to me.
Yeah, exactly.
And then if you like battle royale games and you feel like going back to PUBG, don't play this.
Play Ring of Elysium. Yeah, this is much better. I agree. All right, have you got anything else on your list, or is that about it?
No, I think that's it for me.
Right, strap in. Okay, so I'm cheating a little bit here. I just want to mention I played Uncharted Drake's Fortune remaster, and I enjoyed it for the most part. I thought it was a great game from 2000 and I want to say 7, but that feels like the ages away.
That feels almost too late. I think it's 06. Uncharted 1.
Uncharted 1 was 2007.
God, 07 is such a good year for games, honestly. It is the best year for games, I think, ever. Everything comes out then.
Yeah, I played the remaster because I got Uncharted 4 for Christmas from my brother, and I've had the Uncharted Drake collection in my backlog for ever since I bought a PS4 in September. I really enjoyed it. It had good funny writing. It had too much shooting in the middle. I don't know if that's just because I've played a lot of the recent Tomb Raider games and was a fan of them and really enjoyed the downtime that you got with Lara just to explore things. And I was kind of expecting that from the first Uncharted. I thought, I'll just I'm on a strand, a jungle island, and I'll get to explore some of these really, really cool environments. And then it was but you can explore the environment once you've killed these 40 men that are going to try and kill you right now. I'm like, well, I don't want to do that because
they don't feel like natural. They don't feel like natural enemies either.
No, it's it's very much a corridor shooter.
As much as I personally don't like the new Tomb Raiders, I like how each encounter feels like the enemies that are there were there before you got there.
They're there for a reason. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now it's very much the corridor shooter, and I enjoyed it for the most part. I'm going to get to Uncharted 2 in the next few weeks when I've cleared through a few more of my games. All right, let's talk about a game that actually came out this year, Super Mario U Deluxe. This was originally released on the Nintendo Wii U, and Nintendo is following the trend of releasing all of the fantastic games that released for the Wii U, but no one played because they were on Wii U, releasing them on Switch. And Super Mario U, I bought because I was a huge fan of the Super Mario... I can't remember what it was called, but the one on the Wii where it was like the 4-player co-op for the first time.
I think it was just Super Mario Brothers Wii.
Yeah, I think it's something like that. It might have been like a new Super Mario Brothers, or so the naming scheme is always really convoluted. Yeah, I'm really enjoying this play mainly because it is perfect. It's my new pick up and put down game. Like last year, around this time last year, I had Celeste, which was great because you could just save after like every room, and you could just pick it up and come back to it. Mario's very much the same, where each level is like, well, the time limit is 5 minutes. Well, I think it's like 4.5 minutes. No, 6.5 minutes for each level, but you usually finish it with like, you never get down to like 100 seconds left anyway. So each like level is short, it's contained, and it was great when I was doing my my essays last week, because I said to myself, right, I'm going to write for an hour and then I'm going to play 20 minutes of Mario, and that it was a really nice like revision break. I've done 7 of the 8 worlds, I think. I've just got 1 world left to do. Really enjoying it. I don't know if I'll go back and get all of the like all the star coins. I'll see whether the novelty wears off after that point. But yeah, I've probably put about 15 to 20 hours into it and really enjoying it. Like the nostalgia factor's there, and the level design, it seems to be stepped up a lot from what I remember it being on the Wii. There's new mechanics like from Super Mario 3D World, where Mario can now turn into like a raccoon or something. And then, yeah, so there's like a whole like new flying and gliding mechanic, which is quite interesting. And other than that, it's standard like 2D Super Mario, and it's just, refined and good. So I'm enjoying that on the Switch at the minute.
You basically can't go wrong.
Exactly, that's what I mean. It's like I saw it. I've been looking forward. As soon as they announced it, I was like, "Well, that's an instant buy," because it's 2D Mario, and that's just, you can't really go wrong with that, especially on the Switch. You can take it anywhere you want. So, yeah, that's Super Mario. I touched Dark Souls, and when I say touched, I mean caressed from a long distance. I've literally like just I started a playthrough when it came out last summer. And then sort of fell off a bit because I screwed myself with, like, the way that I play Dark Souls is that I try and I decide what I'm going to spec into it, get bored of that playstyle, and then try and spec into something else, and then realise that I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none, and can now no longer beat anything. And it also didn't help that I missed the opportunity to resurrect the Firekeeper at Firelink Shrine. So she's dead permanently now, and I killed Guinevere, which then meant that I had to kill the Firekeeper in Anor Londo. So now I basically can't, like, there's a lot of things I can't do in my playthrough now. I've screwed everything up. So yeah, I've gone back to it, and I've like basically gone through, like, I got out of the Duke's archives, and the last I remember, I was trying to get through the Crystal Caverns. There's that bit where you have to run across the invisible bridge, and I lost like 40k souls because of that stupid section. And I put it down after that. But yeah, I want to finish Dark Souls before Sekiro, because
it's a very nice thing to say you've done.
Yeah, exactly. It's one that's been in my backlog for a while, and it's just like, I hate that I've not finished it. Dark Souls 3 is on my list after Dark Souls 1, because that is another one where I got about 3/4 of the way through and then hit a wall. But I just want to be able to say that I finished it. So yeah, that's Dark Souls. I streamed GRIS this week. I think that's how you pronounce it.
I think that makes sense. I think it's GRIS. Yeah.
It's a 2D puzzle-y side-scroller platformer. Very artsy-fartsy, I'd say. That's a technical term. That's coined by me. Yeah, so the story of this is that you start out as like a woman in this world that has been robbed of colour. You've lost your voice, and in order to in order to regain your voice, you have to then reintroduce colour to the world, and you go around in these sort of like platforming sections. There's a couple like boss runs, which I wasn't too much of a fan of. They felt very scripted. Those boss fights, like those boss runs where you get to the end of it and it feels like you're just on the edge of being caught, but it's very much scripted, that you can feel the game resisting you going at your full speed, because it's where it wants to keep you like just on the brink of danger.
It's like any it's the difference between, like, I feel like in Tomb Raider, like the old Tomb Raiders, right? So what would happen in it's funny you've mentioned that, because it's something that I actually wanted to talk about, which was I feel like there's a common thing now about these sort of scripted sections, and I think a lot of devs are missing the point.
Mm.
And I think it was Tomb Raider, the start of the first Tomb Raider game in 2013, the reboot, where you're like in that cave and you have to climb out of the cave, and then the title shows up.
Yes,
Yeah,
I know what you mean.
You're during that section, you're pushing forward. That's it. You're holding up on the analog stick, and Lara's going, and they're really trying to create this sense of urgency and dread. And there are quick time events, and there's really scary stuff happening. There's gory stuff happening to the people around you. It's like, we want this to be a really intense event. And while I feel like someone might get something out of that if they don't play games that much, I'm sat there going, I know there is no tension here.
Yeah,
I don't feel anything.
All I have to do is just press these right buttons. Not even that. Like, you know, I don't even have to press them like at that much of a specific time. It's like there's so much leeway that this isn't like you know what I mean. It's very difficult to mess up.
Yeah, like I am watching this bit, which is specifically annoying, because if a QuickTime event does happen and you mess it up, it doesn't feel like you've messed up. It just feels like an inconvenience.
Exactly.
Whereas I feel like in the old Tomb Raider games, you would walk into a room like a corridor, which would have a very clear platforming element to it, and you think this doesn't look especially challenging, and then an enemy or some sort of trap would appear behind you.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay,
traverse it quickly.
Yeah, it's like now I have to actively platform at speed, and that creates tension.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is it's kind of like that in GRIS for the most part, like for the start of the like boss chases, and then you get to the end and you can feel like the camera and the movement is like resisting you going at your full speed while the enemy catches up to you. I'm like, well, you've just, you know, this doesn't have any tension whatsoever, because I know that I'm going to make it out. So it's like, or if I don't make it out, there's nothing I can do about it, and I'm going to hit. Yeah, exactly. So that was the only sort of thing I didn't really like about it. I will say that it is gorgeous. This is on Switch, but I held off getting it on Switch and got it on PC just because I wanted to play it on my full, like, 27-inch 1440p monitor, and I will say that it is absolutely worth it. Do apologise why the Rozzers of Salford are going past my feckin' flat again. Yeah, it's about 4 hours long. It's 15 quid on Steam. I highly recommend it if you're up for, you know, a fairly touching story. I didn't really get the overall themes of what it was trying to convey, whether it was, I don't know, there might have been some sort of symbolism that just went over my
I know what it is.
My ham-fisted man head.
I know what it is because I saw a sort of breakdown it. I won't say what it is, so if anyone wants to play it themselves,
you can tell me after, because
I'll tell you after. But yeah, from what I've seen of it, it looks absolutely fantastic. If you like games like Journey or Thomas Goes
Journey's
Alone,
a good comparison,
or
I'd say
Inside,
it's probably a cross between Journey and I want to say Ori and the Blind Forest.
I'd say it's
weird.
more of a comparison between Inside and Journey, because it's got this style of Journey, but Journey is more of a. It's not
Child of Light. Do you remember that Ubisoft game, Child of Light?
Child of Light's one of my favourite games, actually. Child of Light isn't. I think Child of Light was marketed bad because you think it's a game like Journey, and it's not. It's actually a really good RPG.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I
haven't played it. I'm just going off what I remember it looking like.
Yeah, but it's got gameplay to it, like Inside, and it's got the style of Journey. Like, while Journey isn't necessarily a walking sim, similar to and I don't mean that. That's not always a bad thing now, because Edith Finch exists.
Yeah, exactly.
While Journey isn't a walking sim, it's a bit closer to one than I would have liked. But
it has some really interesting puzzles. Like there is gameplay to agree. There is the puzzles are. I didn't get stuck on any of them. I didn't get stuck on any of them for longer than like 5 minutes. But there are some that will test your ability to. It's not really like platforming. It's just figuring out what to do first and which abilities to use. that sort of thing. There is a little bit of platforming, but it's nothing too. I find it really relaxing. Like I streamed it. I think it took me about 3 hours to finish it. And I was ready for bed after I finished it. Put it that way. I didn't stream it that late. I think I finished it about 11 o'clock. But after that, I had a hot chocolate and I was zonked. So it's very much a chill game. So yeah, I highly recommend it though. If you've if you're not too keen on the sort of games, maybe wait for a bit of a sale. But highly recommend for 15 quid. The other games on my list are Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I picked this up on the. Was it the GOG? No, not it was the Humble sale because they had like a winter sale. So I got this for 25 quid. I have a history with the Assassin's Creed franchise. I loved the originals from Assassin's Creed 1 right the way through to... I even liked Unity a little bit. I think Syndicate was the last sort of traditional like Assassin's Creed before they turned it into an RPG. I despised is a strong word, but I didn't like Origins. I'm a big fan of the original, like, not linear, but you know what I mean, like the really story-focused Assassin's Creed games, and I didn't like Assassin's Creed Origins because I felt like it was shoehorning in a lot... So, Oranges, yeah, well, it is, Assassin's Creed Oranges, I felt like it shoehorned a lot of RPG mechanics in that just didn't make sense for what it was going for. Like it introduced like really egregious level gating for the world, which meant that if you even wanted to just go off and explore things, you'd be absolutely pummeled into the ground. It then meant that you were then, if you wanted to continue on with the story, you'd have to grind out. There was a significant level of grinding to get through like side missions that were literally just fetch quests or go and kill 3 alligators and then come back to me, which after 15 hours I was just like, I'm not doing this. This is boring. I'm not doing it. Which is why I was so worried for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, because they really they took it a step further with like dialogue choices and splintering stories and all that sort of thing. A good mate, Ethan, he's been, I wouldn't say obsessed, but he's been loving it, and he's been given nothing but fantastic feedback, and he's been like, Josh, when are you going to get Assassin's Creed Odyssey? Because we both love Witcher 3, and this is very much in the vein of Witcher 3. So I started playing it this week. It took me... The first play session I did was about 4 hours, and I still didn't make it out of the tutorial area. It's a huge game. I've probably put about 7 hours into it now, and I'm on to like the mainland Greece area bit. I really like the protagonist. I chose Cassandra over generic beardy man number 403, because Alexios, I'm sick of playing giant, buff beardy men in RPGs.
Have you seen the that Nicky Jakey video where he does about bad voice acting, and he's like...
I don't think I have.
And I'll show it to you later, but it's a great video because he's like, I would much rather play as a character who's being voiced by an intern than some like smooth jazz starts playing, and he's like, I'd rather than playing but just like some like 25-year-old guy who's just like so relatable, and he's just in this predicament, and he's got like but he's a bit edgy, but his heart's in the right place, you know what I mean? It's like it's so on point.
That is the perfect Troy Baker impression. I'm really, really enjoying playing as Cassandra. She's like, her voice acting's fantastic. She's witty. She feels like she's a strong character, a character of her own, one that we've not really seen before, especially in the Assassin's Creed franchise. The gameplay, the combat is fun. They've changed it up a little bit from Origins, which I quite like. There's heavy attacks, light attacks. You can break people's shield stances. There's like full abilities now, like full you could spec into like ability trees in Origins, but there's like it's almost like in MMOs and stuff where you have like a hotbar of abilities you can use on like 1 through 4 that you can use. So they're pretty interesting. The world's gorgeous. The only things that I'm concerned about are, again, the level gating. I'm only about 7 hours in. Which is already, when I got 7 hours into Origins, I was starting to feel the threat of the grind. What worries me about Assassin's Creed Origins is because in the main menu, it has a bar called time savers. Now, when Ubisoft are developing a game and they put a microtransaction in that is literally called a time saver, that immediately makes me start to wonder whether they have balanced their game specifically to make you, like grind for things, to like have to grind for things to then push you towards buying a time saver. If you have to buy a time saver in a single player RPG, there's a reason for it. Like, that worries me. I don't know whether the side quests are going to be more interesting than they were in Origins, and whether I'm going to get to the point where I'm just not going to want to play the game anymore because I don't want to grind through killing 7 alligators just so I can advance the story. You know what I mean? The only other thing that worries me is some of the dialogue choices. Again, like talking about RPG features that were forced into the franchise that didn't really need them. There's like romance options, which has been a big thing. I saw it was, praised quite a lot in the reviews. But what I've seen so far, like the example that I'll give is very early on in the game, you meet this woman who's like a warrior. She goes off fighting, and you tell her, like, you're gonna have to, like, if you want to, you send. She's looking for like a quest for greatness or something. I give her some advice or whatever, and then you find her later on, still like very early in the game, and she's like looking after a dad that's ill, and she asks you to go and find some herbs and stuff to create medicine. But one of the dialogue choices is like she's gushing about how like down she's feeling, about how like worried she is about her dad, and there's 3 options. There's like, it's like, you should toughen up, or yeah, I feel you, I hope your dad gets better. And then the third option is like, I forgot how beautiful you are, I'm like, this isn't the time. Like, there's clearly a time and a place. Like
is that the sociopath option?
It must be.
It could be.
Like, obviously, I haven't played enough of the game to sort of see exactly how that relationship would pan out over time. I obviously didn't go for that option. I went for the sympathetic one, but it just felt really off. Like it had been shoehorned in for no reason. So yeah, that's the only criticisms that I would have so far. I will say that the photo mode is probably one of the best that I've seen in any game, any recent game. I've been really enjoying getting some good shots with that. So yeah, that's Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I'll keep playing that and see how I feel. It's the second final, but the other game I'll talk about later on in the release rundown is I've been playing Battlefield 5 this week because they have had they brought out it's the new like Tides of War season.
Lightning Strikes.
Lightning Strikes, that's the one. And there's challenges in it, and I don't know, I just feel like I'm not getting my money's worth because I paid 35 quid for it. I'm like, right, okay, I should probably play some of this game. I've actually been going back and listening, like reliving what I used to do, which is playing a multiplayer game while listening to a podcast, which has been quite good fun. I've sort of fallen out of habit of doing that recently. But yeah, Battlefield 5, they've added a new game mode in called Squad Conquest, which is 8v8. It's basically domination, I think. I wouldn't really call it Conquest.
Conquest small, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like Conquest small, but what I like about it is it takes the best parts of the maps and just uses that area. Like Hamada is way too big, but there's like a certain section of it that feels really good to play on, and it's just that section. And because it's only 8v8, so it's 2 squads versus 2 squads, people actually use team play properly. Like, they actually revive you, they actually give you ammo and stuff. So it feels like how Battlefield should feel to play, but on a smaller scale, if that makes sense. And I've really been enjoying that. The only criticism that I have is that the challenges that you have to do to unlock the weapons for this, like these for the assignments in this season, they're all they're all kind of like time based. Well, not time based, but they're all really easy. It's just like, get so many kills with this weapon, or deal so much damage with this weapon, and it's stuff that's just going to happen over time. Yeah, it's just stuff that's, if you don't focus on it, it's going to happen at some point. It's like inevitable. Whereas I've been playing stuff like Black Ops 4 and Fortnite as well this week, and just going back and doing them challenges. But I really enjoy playing them because they actually make me engage with the game. Like Black Ops is like,
they actively force each. I think something about I sort of complain about Fortnite, which was that the challenges aren't based on gameplay, but they really are, because
Yeah, it forces you to change it where you drop. It forces you to go and look for certain items. It forces you to use weapons that you usually wouldn't, and all that sort of stuff. And
it's so easy. It's so easy in something like PUBG to just know the spot where you drop, and that's the only spot you drop in.
Mm.
And in Fortnite, you just don't do that. You go somewhere else. And in things like COD, it's like, oh, I have to use to complete this challenge to get this like icon or something. I have to use a different gun, or I have to use a different site.
Some certain attachments or something, and I have to play to a certain play style. Whereas Battlefield 5, they're just not that. I mean, I've been getting through it because I've had a podcast as my secondary form of entertainment, but I know for a fact that if I wasn't listening to a podcast, I'd get bored very quickly. So yeah, I'll probably end up keep playing Battlefield 5 just as like my sort of turn over game, just to kill time and listen to a podcast. But yeah, it still very much feels like an early access title to me, as I've touched on already in this podcast. And the only other game I've been playing this week is Resi 2 Remake, which we'll get onto later on in the release rundown. Next up is Hot Topic. We'll go through this quick because I know this podcast is getting on quite a bit for time now. So the question this week is 2019. What are we looking forward to? What trends are gonna emerge? What's gonna happen? Are we gonna start seeing some next gen consoles? Who knows? So Owen, what are you looking forward to in 2019?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm tentatively excited to see where the next generation goes, because I think this is the next generation year. Well, the consoles may not release this year. I think they're definitely going to get announced this year. The new hardware. I think there's still a sour taste in the mouth of Xbox with how they dealt with marketing the Xbox One, and I think hopefully they would
TV stuff.
Yeah, hopefully they would have learned a lot from that, and as we've seen from recent E3s, whether you liked Xbox's last E3 or not, you have to admit that it was 2 hours of them showing games, and that was it.
Yeah. I'm really excited for Xbox this year. I don't know whether that's just because I think it's not easy to see their game plan, but you can kind of start to see how the cogs are whirring in their heads. If you look at the past E3 and XO18 in Mexico City, all that they've pushed is Games Pass and this subscription service, and on top of that they've announced xCloud, the streaming service, and they've got so many services going these rumors about Xbox Scarlet, a discless Xbox potentially. So I think this is going to be the year of subscription services, and the fact that I think that I think the problem with the Xbox One launch is that they focused so heavily on going digital, but didn't go all the way. Like, you could still buy, but I think if the Xbox One released as a fully digital console and went all in, like they were like, right, when this isn't going to have a disc drive, it's going to be all digital. You can't buy games on a disc anymore. If you want to buy, you can buy them on like a USB stick or something in a game store, but it's going to be downloadable for the most part. I think they might do that this year. I think that the possibility of not having a disc drive is very tangible, but because they've been pushing so hard with Game Pass recently, I think that that's going to be more palatable because people are now more used to subscribing to a service and downloading their games.
You say that, right? And if they release a console which is online only and discless, online only in the sense that that's how you
have to download them, yeah,
or stream them, if that's the potential. While I would be completely okay with that, and while I think that the silent majority of gamers would actually be completely okay with that, I think there would be a lot of very loud noise of people saying they don't like that. And I think they're worried about that.
That's the rough thing. I mean, the big thing that relies upon that is internet speeds. And while we now live in 2019 in a world where internet speeds are the majority pretty like decent enough. There are still a lot of, especially in America. I mean, you don't realize how rural a lot of people in America actually are, and their internet speeds are either capped or they're ridiculously low speeds, which is going to be rough, I think. Which it also brings up the possibility of maybe two different versions of an Xbox, maybe one that has a disc drive and one that doesn't, one that is just purely a streaming box, and one that actually runs games locally, which could be interesting to see as well. But yeah, I don't think we're going to start seeing streaming come as a mainstream thing this year. I still think that's got a long way to go. That being said, I think streaming in the long run is going to be a great addition, because I think if you imagine, I think that part of why the Switch is so successful is because it opens up games to a wider audience of where you can take it anywhere. You can take it on the bus, you can take it on the train, you can take it to work with you. And cloud streaming enables that as well, but because I don't want to say everyone has a smartphone and bring up the whole Diablo Immortal thing again, but it's true, isn't it? It's like if you can stream Halo to your phone at work, and you've got like an Xbox controller, I mean, why not?
I'd say that's not. I think it's not actually unfair to say that everyone has a smartphone now and bring up the Diablo thing, because the Diablo thing was very much about, you want to play this game.
Who cares? To play it on a smartphone.
Who cares if it's on a phone? It's still a game, and you're like, well, I don't want to play it on a phone because my phone is limited in terms of power and it's limited in terms of how I play it. Whereas,
I think
if you could stream a game,
streaming's about providing the option. If you want to, like, it opens it up to people who like I don't want to say non-gamers, but it opens it up to like the mobile market, especially the mobile market's it's bigger than you think. It's huge. So opening up AAA like Xbox console games to this other market would be huge for Xbox. And yeah, like so for them, like the mobile market, it could be their primary platform, but it could also be an alternative for people who play on Xbox primarily, but then just like my use case for the Switch is I play on PC primarily, and then I play on the Switch sometimes when I'm at my desk, but then most of the time I take it out and I go and have lunch somewhere and play, or take it on the train. So it's like an alternative way of playing.
Yeah, like I think I'd be completely okay with it, and I think that is where things are going. It's interesting that with all the advances that are being made in personal hardware, like I've actually been upgrading my computer recently. The upgrade will happen tomorrow, and while I've been doing it, you kind of see news that you don't normally see, and just looking at next generation hardware for PCs in particular, but ones that would also go into Xboxes and PlayStations alike, you think this hardware is really incredible, but is it going to matter if the primary source of gaming will be streaming in the future? Because then personal hardware won't really be that important.
Well, you say that, but I mean, if they offer streaming as this like alternative package, it's like you can stream games now if you want to. There are methods that like PlayStation Now. Yeah, so you have the option to stream like PlayStation 4 titles, or you can download them now if you want to. So the option is there.
It's been around for a very long time, actually, streaming games, longer than you think.
Yeah, on live. I'm writing a piece actually at the minute for my news at 7D News. And I'm writing a piece about like streaming, and it's mad because streaming games was first kind of came out, I think it was 2011 with OnLive, and OnLive was bought by Sony in 2015, and that technology is now what powers PlayStation Now.
It was a thing I was talking about a while ago, where I was like, how you can remember a certain point in your life based on the YouTube ad that you got, because it was the only YouTube ad you got. I remember watching Shadow of Israfel And On Live was the ad that I got every single time. That shows how old it is.
So when you think about 2018, are you just going to think about Baby Shark and that do you remember that 1 7-second advert that was like dun 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 dun?
Oh yeah, it was like a. It didn't actually advertise anything. It was like a shot of a lake and then a guy drinking coffee, and that was it.
It was just like a ukulele in the background.
Oh god, I remember that. I wonder if I can find it again.
You'll find a bass boosted version of it for sure. There's plenty of them. So yeah, I think Xbox are going to have a cracking year. I think we're going to start seeing stuff around E3. I mean, it's difficult to predict Sony's game plan because they missed PlayStation Experience last year. They're missing E3 this year, and their PlayStation presence at last year's E3 was, I don't want to say mediocre, but it wasn't as particularly. They didn't put much effort into it. Like it was a tent, and they just showed some trailers for games. So they didn't, it's like, part of me thinks is like, well, maybe that's just because they don't have anything new to show. The other half of me thinks they're gearing up for whatever the PlayStation 5 is going to be. They have to be, right? Yeah, I think that's the game plan. So I think by the end of this year, I think Microsoft will know, like we got the tease for Project Scorpio for the Xbox One X. We'll see like a tease for whatever the next Xbox is going to be at E3, maybe at their own event like XO by the end of the year. Sony will then follow suit with their announcement, and at some point in 2020 we'll have the two consoles releasing. I think Xbox might be first out of the door. Yeah, I think that's going to be the thing.
Also remember that Xbox One wasn't announced at E3, was it announced beforehand?
Yeah, it was a couple of months, wasn't it? And then they tried to damage control all the TV stuff by talking about games at E3.
Well, they had to damage control the always online element as well, and the fact that the key elements of the console that people were asking about, they just didn't give them clean answers. Absolute joke, and it's still hurting them to this day.
The days of Don Matrick.
Oh, Don Matrick. Can I find a picture of him now? I want to see how haggard he looks.
He went to work at Zynga, didn't he? Yeah. And in terms of Switch, possible hardware revision this year.
Yeah.
It'd be good. I probably wouldn't buy one myself just because I'm not up for spending it. If Game did like a trade-in deal where I got like 100 and 150 quid off like a new Switch, if I traded in my old one, I'd be all right with that. But I'm not up for paying another 300 quid. I don't really see. I mean, the hardware's fine. Like maybe if it could power things slightly better at, like when it was docked, that'd be nice. Maybe slightly larger screen, but apart from that, I'm happy with how my Switch is.
I found an article just searching his name that just says Don Matrick, Zynga's new CEO, quote, lives like a Saudi prince. That to me is him walking out of the Xbox office, having loaded it with C4, blowing it up, and going to Dubai.
I can see that. Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, it's going to be a cracking year for games this year, though. I mean, I as I mentioned, I've made a spreadsheet of all the games that are releasing this year and marked the ones that I'm interested in, and I want to say that 75% of them are marked essential in green, with most of the other ones either Xbox Game Pass, EA Access Premier, or mildly interested.
Are there any on red?
The only ones that I've got on red are Ace Combat 7, Jump Force, Dirt Rally 2. It's only just because I bought Dirt Rally 4. No, sorry, Dirt 4 like 6 months ago, so I'm really not that up for another thing. And Total War 3 Kingdoms, because I'm not that interested in.
I don't even know what that is.
Total War.
Oh, Total War, okay.
And also Wasteland 3, because I'm not that into isometric RPGs either. But literally everything else is on either essential or interested. So it's huge. I mean, if we're still doing this podcast in 3 weeks, it's going to be a hell of a lot longer than it is now, because February 15th is Crackdown 3, Far Cry New Dawn,
Thank God I got
Metro Exodus.
Thank God I got the upgrade at the time that I did.
Yeah.
Because I'll actually be able to play these games properly.
Well, no, you won't, because you won't be able to afford them, because you've just spent all your money.
Oh no! I've got enough left. I was gonna.
I'm just joking. So it's going to be, even I'm looking at my bank account thinking, Christ, it's going to be an expensive year for video games.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's worth talking about the games we're most excited for the year, because that would take a very long time, just because there's so many games.
Yeah, we'll get to them talking about them in this podcast throughout the year, to be honest.
Exactly,
There's
yeah.
just so
we
many.
can talk about how excited we are for them a week before they release.
Release rundown. So it's a list of games released in the last 7 days and a mention of what's coming up next week. So the only game that released this week of notable note is Resident Evil 2, the remake. I have played about 4 hours of this. I streamed it today. You can find it on my Twitch channel if you listen to this, whenever you listen to this. It should be up there. Yeah, I didn't play Resident Evil 2 before this remake, mainly because that game is older than I am.
That's mad.
It is a little bit mad. Resident Evil 2 came out in 1998 and I was born 1999, so it's not much older than me, but it is still older than me. It's a full remake. I went and looked at some game. I didn't realise how dated Resident Evil 2 looked, but I went and looked at some of the gameplay and it is quite mad. Just like, I'm looking at it thinking, oh yeah, I know what that bit is. I just played that bit, but it looks like, like a modern AAA game. It's quite mental. It takes, the basic story, the story beats, but it changes a lot of things. Like, a lot of the puzzles are different. They're much more modern. Graphics, obviously, it feels, as I mentioned earlier, like playing it, I'm sat there thinking, yeah, this game originally released in 1998, and yet it feels very, very modern in terms of the way that the gameplay flows and in the way that the story flows. The only bit that feels dated is the cutscenes and the dialogue, because even though they've re-recorded dialogue, the writing is very, it's hard to describe, but it's very 90s.
I would not call it bad.
It's not bad, it's just different.
But you can use, I wouldn't call it bad. You can use whatever other adjective you want. That's what I'd use.
Pretty much. Like, there's a scene like when you meet back up with Claire quite early on, and they just have I'm not sure whether these people have history. Is Claire Redfield and Leon, because they're different? There's different characters in Resi 1, isn't it? Resi 2 is like its own story.
Is it Chris Redfield in Resident Evil 1? I genuinely don't know.
It's not Chris Redfield. I can't remember. Anyway, yeah, but there's a scene like a bit in, and they start having like what seems to be like a flirty conversation. I'm like, you met each other like 15 minutes ago in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. Why are you flirting now? It's just things like that. That's like, it's, and you can switch over to like the classic costumes, which, I mean, they've updated Leon's to look, more like police, look more like modern police. And they've updated Claire, so she's not wearing short shorts and a tank top. So, much more 2018, 2019 even. But yeah, it is class. The gameplay feels very modern. I've enjoyed the 4 hours that I've played of it, and I can't wait to play more. The critical reception's been incredible as well. I've seen like 9s out of 10s in pretty much every outlet and review that I've seen. So yeah, I don't know what your because you said you wanted to play this, right?
Oh, definitely. I'm definitely going to play it at some point. I think with a lot of these games, they're sort of one and done. And
yes. Well, actually, this is weird because Resident Evil 2, you can play it from two perspectives. So it's one story, and I'm doing Leon's perspective first, but you can also do Claire's perspective, which is essentially the same story but from a different perspective, and you come at it happens at the same time, but you do things in like a slightly different order. Yeah,
I think
it's weird.
I think by one and done, I more meant that it's like I feel like when Resident Evil 7 came out, I was interested to the point where I was watching people play it but not playing it myself. And after watching people play it, I thought, me playing it myself, I'm not going to get anything out of this experience.
Yeah.
But after finishing watching it, I realized that it was a great game, and I knew that I'm not going to do the same thing with Resident Evil 2. if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good shout. So I've really enjoyed playing it. The puzzles are, I mean, even if you do watch like a playthrough, the puzzles are they change like they're local to you, so you can't like Google the answer. I think like looking through lockers and stuff, like the passcodes for that are the same, but some of like the keypad codes and stuff are all local.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting because that'll severely, I don't know if it'll limit it or make it interesting when it comes to people speedrunning it.
Oh yeah, that's a good shout. Yeah, well, the way that I've solved a lot of my I was showing Owen before the podcast. I sent him a picture. I have a notepad in front of me that if anybody came into my flat and looked at what I've been writing on this, they'd be like, "Is this guy like?" Like Bandersnatch, if you've watched that, it's just like an absolute mess of like lines and numbers and all that.
It's not as bad as your Wolfenstein.
It's not as bad as my Wolf. Yeah, when quick diversion. Wolfenstein 2, there is a scene where you have to remember lines, for like where you're auditioning for the part of yourself, and you have to do it to Hitler. I mean, this game's been out for 2 years now. I'm not bothering with spoilers. So here's me thinking, I'm not going to remember what these lines are because I'm an idiot. So I'm going to write down what they are. However, the lines that I had to remember was like, I can't remember what it was now, but it was, it's going to annoy me. It was like horrendous, like Nazi propaganda, and I wrote it all down on my notepad, and then went away, back home for Christmas. Completely forgot that I had this written down on my notepad. So if anybody like walked in like to like do maintenance or whatever in my flat and saw that I had like Nazi propaganda written down on my notepad, there might have been a few phone calls made. But yeah, I've the amount of scribbles that I have on this notepad, writing down like solutions to puzzles, is quite mental. So yeah, if you're a fan of Resident Evil, this is an absolute must buy. I've seen it I think on GMG, Green Man Gaming, they're selling it for £30 already, which is an absolute bargain. So I mean, go pick it up on there if you really want it. Yeah, absolute banger of a game. I'm going to finish it this week on stream. And
is that all that's come out, or is it
that's
now
all that's
what's
all
coming
that's
out?
come out really this week? There's nothing else. There was some stuff that came out last week, but I don't really want to pad it through.
So now it's just stuff that's coming out.
Yeah, the big one next week, Kingdom Hearts 3, January 29th.
Yeah, and Christ knows what we're going to talk about when it comes to that.
I won't be playing it, but I'll be playing it eventually, but not next week. I've got too much going on.
I don't think I'll be playing it next week because I'll still be wanting to play games on my new PC. But
yeah,
we will play it eventually because I think that even if we haven't played the previous games before, it'll still be funny to hear two people who never have talk about their experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we should coordinate and sort of do it at the same time. When we do that.
There's a whole meme with summing up bits in Kingdom Hearts, and some of them are just like really funny, but like they're meant to be funny. So someone's like, it's like, can someone explain to me what a nobody is? And someone responds with, right. So basically, they have no emotions, and that makes them very angry and sad. You know? And then there was another one which was like, right, so who are these guys? And then someone responds with, right, so basically all of these guys are the same guy, except they were formed by two different guys coming together, but they're also themselves.
Okay, right. This sounds very, very Japanese. I'm not gonna lie.
It's like it's honestly like Stephen Moffat is wearing like it's like Stephen Moffat went into a Japanese game factory and came out the other side having bought all of the gift shop.
Oh dear, I'm very interested. I mean, the reviews are already out for it. Well, not all of them because there's a bit of controversy. Square Enix didn't send review codes to many UK outlets. So I think, as far as I know, the only UK outlets to have reviewed it are the Daily Star. Jordan Ollerman wrote a really good review for the Daily Star, and Vic Hood wrote the review for Games Radar. And as far as I know, they're the only sort of UK outlets to have got it. So Eurogamer haven't got a code. GameSpot got a code, but they're like based in San Fran. I think Timur Hussein reviewed that, and he's part of the UK team, so I'm not quite sure about that. But yeah, there's a lot of UK outlets that haven't got the review code yet, so their reviews will be coming a little bit later. So we'll talk about the critical reception next week when we have a more of a full picture. The only other game to release next week is Ace Combat 7: Skies Unknown on the PC. It's already out on consoles, but it's coming out on PC, which I was kind of looking forward to getting into this before it came out on consoles. But then I looked at the sort of the other games that I want to play, and it's like, do I really have time for an arcade combat?
It seemed I watched someone play it, and I mean, I'm not into jet like games. I think I played a Tom Clancy one a while ago, and it was quite fun.
I think it'd be fun for about a couple hours, and then after that, I'd be like, right,
yeah,
well, I've had my
I
fill.
think it's for a very certain kind of person, and if you're that person, great. But I just don't. It's not something I could. I've got nothing to say about it, and that's a bad sign.
Yeah, it doesn't warrant me paying 40. For me to pay like 40 quid for it and then to play it for like 3 hours, it'd be like, well, it's a waste of my money. Really, it wouldn't be a waste of my time, but it's just not. I might pick it up in a few years when it's like 4 quid on Steam, something like that.
Well, if it should have been made by Square Enix, because it'd be 3 quid after a month.
Yeah, I bought Tomb Raider, Shadow of the Tomb Raider when that first came out for like 45 quid, and then I think it was about 20 like 2 weeks later, something stupid like that. Oh, it's quite mad. Anyway, yeah, we'll talk more about Kingdom Hearts next week on the release rundown. Alright, final segment for this week is Feels Good Man Clap. This is highlighting one whole... Feels Good Man... That's the one. Highlighting one wholesome thing to have come out of this week, because the world's shite, innit?
It's not.
YouTuber,
it's not. But it's funny. It's funny. It's funny to say that.
If you want to be really pessimistic, just don't turn on the news and you'll be fine. YouTube and Twitch streamer H-Bomber Guy streamed for over 60 hours non-stop in an attempt to complete Donkey Kong 64. He raised over $340,000 for the charity Mermaids, which raises awareness about gender non-conformity in children and young people in the UK. He was joined on stream by celebrities such as John Romero, who is the co-creator of Doom, activist Chelsea Manning, US Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I'm sorry if I butchered that name, and Grant Kirkhope, who is the voice of Donkey Kong.
Wow, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, joined by the voice of Donkey Kong. He got him to say like loads of like positive lines about like trans awareness, but in the voice of Donkey Kong. The only downside to this story is that the stream was semi-inspired by Gary Linehan, who is the writer of Father Ted and IT Crowd, comedy shows like that, who last year caused the National Lottery Fund donation, which was £500,000, which was going to go to the Mermaids charity. He caused it to be put under review after he started a mob of Mumsnet users, because he's a very angry man who doesn't like trans people, apparently, and tweets about it all day.
Imagine the mad cat lady from The Simpsons. but instead of throwing cats, he's throwing very ignorant, stupid abuse in a sort of Irish rage, like, "Oh, I don't fucking believe it, it's mental," and and everyone's like, "Shut up, Graham." And yeah,
that's pretty much it.
That was it.
He went on Mumsnet and like formed a gang of the UK's most angsty mums to like email the National Lottery. And
Karen from Basingstoke. That's my go-to now. Like people
Karen
like
from Maidenhead.
It's like Claire from Bum Sex. It's always like in America, it's like you talk about your particular mum, they talk about the soccer mom.
That's the one, yeah.
But it's like here, it's like we don't really have that culture. So I think there should be a name, because it's annoying, because I don't want to make it be one name, because there's nice Karens. There's nice Karens.
Kids.
That's the thing. There's nice Karens, but it would be really funny if it was Karen.
I've got my godmother's called Karen.
She's a right Karen. She is.
You get the idea. Anyway, this stream it raised over $340,000 for the charity, which is not it's put Gary Linehan to shame. Anyway, put it that way. So yeah, fantastic cause and fantastic event as well.
If you can't motivate people through the power of belief, and you can't motivate them for themselves, you can motivate them through spite and Gary Linehan. That's what we've learned from this.
I've learned this week that spite is a great motivator. I'll get to that in the shameless plugs. So that's the good story.
Absolutely fantastic that happened. Really something. It does open sort of a wider debate that we really can't go into this week. I think there will inevitably, given that it's 2019, there will be some sort of news story that will allow us to go a bit more in depth about what this topic means for gaming.
Exactly.
And the characters in it and the people who work in the industry. We can't do that this week. The sort of game's public reaction to it, but to see a single person raise 340 grand for this charity on Twitch through gamers is pretty much the nail in the coffin that every TERF, being like TERF meaning anti-trans rights people, it's pretty much the nail in the coffin that they need, and it's great.
Exactly. Thing that impresses, obviously the money's fantastic to have been raised, but can you imagine being awake for 60 hours? I can barely manage a 12-hour day. Never mind sitting playing Donkey Kong.
Would you be awake for 20 hours? Would you be awake for 60 hours if you were making the equivalent of £10,000 an hour for a charity?
For charity, I guess. Yeah, that would be a good motivator. Yeah, true. Final segment is just shameless plugs and outro. So social media rundown. If you thank you very much for listening, first of all. If you've made it this far, we appreciate it. If you want to find the podcast, whatever you're listening to on now, this is going to go live at 10 a.m. on Sunday, and I'm going to be using the YouTube Premiere system, giving that a go. Also on Twitch, using that Premiere system. I'm going to try and get this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, everywhere. So there'll be links in the description. Also for all of the links to all of the articles and sources that we've used or spoken about. They'll all be linked in the description and metadata and all that sort of stuff. If you want to find me on social media, I am at JoshyBoyles2 on Twitter. I'm also on Twitch, twitch.tv/JoshyBoyles. YouTube is youtube.com/Josh Boyles. You'll find all of that down below. Owen?
I don't really have as much of a social media presence. The main presence that I have is probably on Twitter, and that's at Zanzibar Crumpet. I do have a Twitch channel. It's probably not worth plugging at the moment because I don't stream that much, but I think after getting my new computer, I should be able to stream a much wider variety of games because it won't be shit. So
that does help.
That does help. So you never know. Maybe I'll really get into streaming stuff because I do enjoy doing it. But it was a pain on my last computer.
Streaming's good fun. I enjoy streaming on I don't stream. I have specific games that I stream. Like I'm streaming Resident Evil 2 at the minute, and I really enjoyed streaming Dark Souls last year, mainly because I'm incompetent, and it's just nice to have basically a quick access Wikipedia in chat. that's
how do I do this?
Nice yeah, how do I do this? And then in 5 seconds, someone who knows how to play the game will tell me.
It's good as well because I found that when I'm watching people play a game, it's very easy for when they're playing a game and they'll say, "Wait, was that a bug? Like, what happened there? Like, I don't understand this mechanic. Like, is this game's broken?" Or maybe they'll get angry at it, something like that. But then all it takes is people in the chat to say, "No, this is why," and they're like, "Oh, well, that's fair enough then."
Yeah, exactly.
There's probably so many games I've played in the past completely by myself that I'll absolutely hate because I think they're broken, but it's actually just something I'm missing.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say streaming Dark Souls completely turned me on it. Like, I can play Dark Souls by myself now and I'll be fine, but just to get me into the franchise, streaming was pog. Yeah, and I was going to plug any, like, sort of work. I haven't actually got much to plug at the minute. I've just come sort of back to uni. I might have something next week if I get my feature finished. The only other thing that I'm going to shamelessly plug is that I am running a marathon in 10 weeks.
Yes, this is a very weird, which very noble until you know why.
Well, I'm running for Cancer Research UK. I do have a Just Giving page. Donations aren't expected in any way, but if you feel like you want to chuck some money that way, it'll be much appreciated. I'll link that as well. My mate Dan just like randomly put in like the Discord the other day. It was like, oh yeah, I might be doing the London Marathon in a few weeks. I was like, what? Because he doesn't run, and I don't, I'm like, I run for a hobby and I enjoy it, but I was like, I'm not having Dan outbeat me, like do a marathon when he doesn't even do any, like, he's not the run, I'm the running guy. So out of spite, I was like, oh, I'm going to sign up for the Manchester Marathon and do it, because it's like 2 weeks before the London one. And then it turns out that when Dan actually said he was doing the London Marathon in quotation marks, he meant he was volunteering as first aid. So I've signed myself up for a marathon out of spite, for no real reason. But
that's the best way for it to happen, honestly.
Yeah, true. To be fair, my running plans for this year was I wanted to do the Great North Run, which is a half marathon, first in September, and then by the end of the year be capable of doing a marathon, and then do a marathon in 2020.
Well, so if you do the half one, just do that one twice. That's how running works, isn't it?
Yeah, that's how it works. Yeah, it's easy peasy. I'm sure it's not that difficult. So yeah, I'm running the Manchester Marathon. That's the short story, and I'm doing it for it. Again, raising money for charity. You can't go wrong with that. So yeah, if you feel like you're generous enough to chuck a couple quid that way, that would be much appreciated. All right, well, thank you very much for listening. Hopefully you've enjoyed. We'll catch you next week.
Yep. See you later.